I don't know why it hasn't gone live yet, but we're live. It says we're live. Hi.
Hi.
Are we live? I hope we are. We had a small snafu, everybody. And Zeke, I hope you're going to tell us if we're live. I think we are
Okay,
because
good.
we were just talking and
Yeah.
having all the things to say, and then
We'll circle back around and talk about the things because
all
I
the
think,
things.
yeah, I think that they're important for everybody who is as invested in what we're doing and what we're watching as we are.
Absolutely.
Oh, but
Well,
first,
but
you
first,
excited about?
I'm excited. Are you excited?
Yeah, you before we went live, you were telling me what you were excited about.
Well, welcome to Palmetto Primetime, y'all. Y'all have been telling us for a few weeks now that we needed a name, and so
You
we've
got a
got a
name?
name. We have
Yes.
a name. We hope that that y'all like our name, and we've been coming to y'all at 8 o'clock, a couple of nights a week, and we thought
Prime time?
it's prime time. We'll talk about all the prime issues, all of the things that we've got going on, and we kind of have one more thing to tell everybody that this is not only just going to be lives that we're doing, but we're gonna we're gonna have a podcast. Yay!
And so, like, beyond the Murdoch stuff, and we'll
Beyond the Murdoch
talk about,
stuff.
issues affecting, victims and victims' access to justice and things that are just of interest to people who have become interested in the things that we talk about here. So we hope it transitions well
We hope
after the.
so. So stick around with us. So make sure you subscribe and you like our channel and stick with us as we transition to Palmetto Primetime.
And
Um,
thank you for being with us.
and thank you for, I know that these first things that we're doing, we're lawyers. We're not technology folks. That's why we have Zeke on, who's been helping us. Thank you, Zeke,
Our resident magician.
our resident magician. Um, but we are very appreciative that y'all are working with us as we're figuring things out.
Yeah.
So
And what we were talking about before we went live, I was telling Sarah that, yeah, I don't know about y'all, but I think a lot of us are very, very invested in this trial. We're watching it. We're spending a lot of hours of our day in it. And as a lawyer who has dealt with some pretty gruesome things, and like today had domestic violence jury trials in the morning, and I'm fine. I'm generally fine. Like I can digest some very difficult topics, but when it gets in me, I don't realize it until it manifests with some physical symptom. And I got kind of jittery over the weekend, and I know that it is because of the investment in this trial and the facts of this case. And so I imagine that I'm probably not the only one who is feeling kind of like that.
you're definitely not the only one. And I think if you're feeling that way, knowing the types of things that we see and deal with on a daily basis, and we have that armor. I think folks that don't deal with this sort of thing on the day to day have got to be just deep
Right.
breaths, y'all, because it is hard. And I know we say that at the end of every time we get together, but it is really difficult to to hear this stuff for hours a day or however long you're listening to that. So we hope that we can help find some bright spots in some of this, and remind everybody to take care of yourself. Um, but as we start to answer some of these questions, we've got some really good questions. I keep saying every time we're like, we got some really good questions. So you guys are really fantastic. The things that y'all put in heck before we even started. Um, so what do you think? What's our first one?
First question is, who do we think the rebuttal witnesses are going to be? Creighton
Mm,
said 4 or 5,
4 or 5.
or maybe 5.
And something was reported this afternoon or tonight that several of the partners, former partners of Alec Murdaugh, were hovered around Creighton Waters.
I saw that. Fitz News reported that he was talking to 4 partners and Randy was walking up. He would be the and maybe 5, which would be really interesting if Randy Murdaugh was a witness for the state.
Right.
And I'm sure he would be very, very conflicted. I would have put John Marvin as a witness for the state before I would assume Randy would be a witness for the state.
And that's really interesting because they were, obviously brothers, but law partners. And, Randy has transitioned to the Parker Group, which is the new firm that kind of came from PNPED. So I think it will be really interesting to see if, in fact, it's the law partners.
Kenny Kinsey, though.
Kenny Kinsey, we talked about that.
I wouldn't think it would be all law partners. I would think Kenny Kinsey to come in and dispute this 2-shooter theory, which is where I think one of the only places that they really gained some traction in the notion that Alec needs to be excluded from the list of suspects.
Right. And I thought today was so interesting with the experts that they put up, and then of course ending on John Marvin Murdaugh's testimony. But it seemed like the overwhelming thing I kept seeing here was we have so many defense witnesses, multiple defense witnesses are contradicting other defense expert witnesses.
Weren't they now?
Like, I don't quite understand that. So we've got the first expert witness that testified the beginning of last week, and that's where
the little people,
the 5'2" shooter, where the shooter was not a tall, large person.
And then this one is so tall, it's coming
very tall, like very tall. What do you make of that?
I think they felt foolish because I think they're monitoring like public opinion. And that super short shooter theory was made fun of by so many people. I made fun of it. I mean, it felt so ridiculous. Like how many people usually, we assume it's a male. How many 5'2" men are there? Just not many. So you're really narrowing the scope of who it could be. And so I think that felt so silly that I think very silly. Felt like they really needed to walk it back.
I think I wrote something earlier today, like they just realized that dog wasn't going to hunt. Like it was like, let's just cut our losses on that and try something new.
Let's throw something else at the wall and see if it sticks, because that spaghetti didn't stick.
It did not stick. I didn't think it did not stick to that wall. So they're like, all right, well, we'll just keep going. And that's kind of the beauty in the defense, is that they can really, okay, well, that maybe wasn't as well received as we hoped.
They usually don't dispute their own experts.
That's a rarity. But also a benefit of this being so publicized for the defense is that they can see what it looks like, get some feedback on that. And it's like, okay, that's not working.
Let's in real time.
Try something else.
So what's the next one? Well, Judge Newman is apparently not allowing journalists to attend the Moselle visit. What do you think of that, Sarah? I think that's wise.
I think it is too. I mean, I think you have to protect, he's had this order that, you cannot identify the jurors, no pictures, nothing about the jurors. And I think it's a no-brainer to me. I know that there are some journalists that appear to be a little bit upset about, that ruling, but, Judge Newman is there to try this case, to hold court, and to make the best decisions for his courtroom. And it just so happens that his courtroom is going to extend to Moselle. And I didn't think that he would allow that anyway. So it wasn't a huge surprise for me. What about you?
It sort of is interesting that people believe that they have a right to, televised access to
everything.
And someone today said to me on Twitter, something like, I didn't even say anything related to it. If you have people on Twitter, they'll just get like a little out there.
Oh no, my feed is very chill. I don't know about you.
They do. And so they were like, you can't convince me you didn't watch the Susan Smith trial. And I'm like, one, I had a lot going on in my life. That was the year I graduated college and got married. And I'm like, but that wasn't televised. And they were like, no, it was on court TV. And I'm like, well, that was 1995. And let me check. And I checked, and no, it was not televised. So, there are a lot of trials that happen that might even have public interest, like the Russell Laffitte trial. That
Right.
was not televised. We don't have, court TV doesn't have an absolute right to
Exactly.
televise all the proceedings.
And I think it's just a good reminder, that I've been very vocal about some of these photographs that have gotten out and some of these stills that have come from some
Mhm.
of the videos that were released,
Mhm.
and how I really feel that that infringes on, victim privacy and confidentiality. And, the state is obligated to treat all victims with dignity and respect. And the number of folks who say, well, it's in court. We have a right to see that. Well, the jurors are the ones that have to see it. As
Right.
the public, we don't have just an overwhelming right to say we're going to look at all of these photographs. We have a right to all of, all the things. So,
Mhm.
um, I mean, I think it definitely tracks with what we've seen, previously in this trial and other trials, and I'm not surprised.
I agree.
Um,
I agree.
What do you think? I got to ask this. So this is a Sarah question. And y'all, we're going down. We've got a huge list of questions. Y'all keep them coming. Um, so what did you think about Dick Harpootlian was saying, you know, when are we actually going to be finished? So if we've got rebuttal, and he always says it in such a little smart assy way, right? And it's just so Dick.
It
I
is. Hmm. It's smart. It's smart. He's always like, he does
he's very clever.
nothing that is not designed to affect some goal of his. And I think that goal was to appear to the jury. Was it said in front of the jury? The when
I
are we
don't
gonna get finished?
I
Or
don't think that was said in front of the jury. No, I don't think it was.
basically to say he's taken too much
It's
time.
his fault.
I would never take so much time. I mean, it's just he's bold. Like I said, he's like extract. He's a whole bottle of extract, and I need about 2 drops of
Just a
Dick
drop.
Harpootlian energy in me because I've always been a people pleaser, and he is the opposite of me. So I need just a little bit,
Just a
not too
little
much.
smidge.
Mhm.
Just a smidge. Um, so I've seen a lot of folks say, "Oh, the defense created delays at the same time that he created the narrative that it was the state's fault." Yep, yep, totally,
Okay.
totally, exactly. Um, so we were just talking about the jurors. What are your thoughts on how do these jurors maintain their privacy and security, after the verdict?
I think it's really going to be up to them. I think that some of them will, give in to giving interviews and that kind
Yep.
of thing. I remember after the OJ verdict that there were a few jurors that I remember seeing a lot after that verdict. They told us exactly what they were thinking, what was important, what wasn't important. I remember one of them saying that the domestic violence evidence had no effect on them. It just was not important at all. And I thought how odd that was
Right.
because we were talking about a violent act, and I've wondered if they'll give the interviews and tell us what they thought about the financial crimes evidence or the drug evidence or whatever, and how that affects them. But Judge Newman has done such a good job at keeping their privacy throughout the trial. They won't have the protection of Judge Newman when it's over. But I think
But
that, right, I think that if they want to maintain their privacy, then they will, except for, within their community, people are going to know. But, outside of the community, nationally and worldwide, they're only going to be outed if they want to be, I think. What do you think?
I think that's true. I think for the most part, I mean, you can't harass anybody just because you've been a juror doesn't mean that, you have to endure the harassment of, the news media or whatever. So I think that they'll have just that general protection. I think that Judge Newman will give a general cautionary uh warning to folks regarding that, at the end of the trial.
Yeah.
Um, but we've seen a lot of cases where, the majority of the jury gets back together and they're interviewed on, Dateline or whatever, as they're talking about, how they analyzed the case together and how they deliberated and what were those big things that they really wanted to, they really just focused in on, and, what were some of the things that swayed them one way or another. So I
Right.
think that'll be interesting to see. And also just the fact that we're talking about this means that we're seeing some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. For weeks it feels like we haven't. But
I am really glad. So many mornings I would get really excited to turn on the trial and see what was happening. And that excitement is starting to wane
it
for me.
definitely is, for sure, for sure.
I'm I'm ready. I'm ready to get back to my regular life. And I am sure these jurors like are feeling like that times 1,000.
Absolutely. I
I
mean,
hope that they can maintain their privacy when this is over. But I mean, the press is so paparazzi like now.
yes.
It's very different than it used to be, and I do worry that I've had a call from somebody today where press was knocking on their door and they were like, how do people know where I live? And so it's very concerning that folks don't seem to respect privacy the way
Absolutely.
they used to.
Very true. Very true. And I think, you know, we're social media, the internet, just it gives us kind of what we were just talking about, people thinking they have a right to see,
The access.
going the access to, the trip to Moselle. It kind of, sometimes we need to check up from the neck up about what we really are entitled to and what's appropriate. But I think that Judge Newman will be very clear in what he will say, and letting the jurors know that they don't have to cooperate or endure
Right.
whatever it is that it is.
Thank
So
God for Judge Newman.
he's
He
just
was
he's
what
the
a
best.
perfect choice.
Great fit.
And like to represent South Carolina to the
Oh
nation.
yes,
South Carolina.
he's been a very, he's just been a wonderful guiding force, and his moments of, all right, we're going to stand up. It's so good. I love it.
No, thank goodness. He's
Thank
just
goodness
like,
for him,
and I know the jurors feel cared about because of that. So yeah.
for sure. Um,
Hey, I
so
found something today. I don't know if you've
what you got?
seen this. Do you know who this is?
I love it. I love it. C Dub right there.
Yes, he
Crane
was
Waters.
2 years ahead of me in law school. So I pulled out our law school yearbooks and snapped that picture. I mean, he's very
He
recognizable.
looks the same to me. I mean, slightly his hair's a little bit different,
Yeah. He has,
but
right, he has no like goatee and he has hair on the top of his head. And so he's just, yeah, but he looks like a baby
he
too.
looks like a baby. He really does. Did he play in bands when y'all were in law school?
I don't even remember. He was a 3L when I was a 1L. So I was just trying to not drown. So I don't
Let me
remember
survive this,
a
please.
lot about that year. I was just like, all I remember of that year is reading. So
Well,
yeah, I wasn't going out and doing anything, but I was going home and reading. So
reading all of the things, all of the
yeah.
things. Well, speaking of C Dub, and I love that everyone's using C Dub. um, Thoughts on why he showed the picture of the golf cart?
Yeah.
Um, will they circle back? Didn't really bring it up in the state's case. Maybe new info.
There are a few red herrings in this whole thing. And I started making a list one day, like, what
UT
does this mean?
receipts,
The goosey receipt.
goosey,
I don't
goosey,
understand
whatever.
the goosey
I don't
receipt
even.
from early. That's when we were paying attention to
We,
everyday. But yeah, there's a lot that they put out there that I'm just not quite sure why.
but do you think maybe some things are put out there to see if the other side is going to bite? Like maybe they will try and explain something or try to explain it away. I
But
don't know.
that they're going to have to guess at what it means before they explain it
I
away.
don't, but maybe they think that the state might have one view of it, and maybe,
Did the
you know,
golf cart have one of those things in it that holds guns?
I think it did have a rack of
There's
sorts.
like almost like a cup holder thing that you can mount in the middle of the front that holds guns. Do you think they wanted to put that picture back there with the jury for one of them to say, hey, look, this holds two guns?
And I
I don't
think
know.
that would be a great closing
Totally
argument, right?
guessing. Yeah, I don't know why they brought it out. That
We will we will keep
that was
watching to
that was
see.
a red herring potentially. That goes down there with the Gucci receipt.
Exactly. Um, all right. I love this question, Christine. No exclamation point. Will the state be allowed to bring psychiatric expert testimony regarding family annihilator, dependency narcissism? Would they even want to?
I think they would want to. I would want to if I could do that. But that is not the motive that they filed originally. I mean, I think it is sufficiently different enough that they can't just say, oh, it's the same thing. Because their original motive that they filed and gave the defense notice of was to buy time, like as a temporary distraction from his financial crimes. Family Annihilator is a whole, psychiatric profile that would be, I think, different than this notion of buying time. I think that they can kind of get it in closing, to be like, well, maybe he was sparing them from humiliation, which to him is a fate worse than death. Maybe that's what he was telling himself, while in reality it was to create a distraction. That's what I would argue if I was them. But I mean, I'd spend more time formulating it, but that's about where I go with it.
That about ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right with that, and I think that you know, I'd heard, hearing the term family annihilator. I mean, it's not a super common term, and I think it's something that has come up since the trial has started.
Mhm.
Um, and that's something that I think maybe the prosecution pulled from just people watching this case and hearing things. Um, from just the community, the larger community that's watching in general. Um, and I think maybe that's why he asked that question to Alec, because it's like it was a startling question, like what? Family
And
annihilator.
Alec was not familiar
He was
with
not familiar with
that
that at all.
psychiatric profile. He was like, what do you mean? But I think Creighton put it out there to cause people to Google it.
Yep.
That was not for him. That was for the Googlers of the world. It's worth a Google.
For the rest of us. For the
Yeah.
rest of us.
Mhm.
Um, okay. Why are jurors not permitted to take notes? They are.
They haven't asked to.
They have not asked to do that. So it's not something I've seen a lot of stuff. Well, South Carolina doesn't allow jurors to take notes. That is not
The
true.
judge.
And in fact, it is determined by the courts in the discretion of the court. But in this particular case, it, there was no,
It hasn't been.
no mandate that you can't
Mhm.
take notes. They just haven't requested to take notes.
Right.
And you know, I'm not bothered by that
Me
personally.
either. Me either. I mean, there's no way you could write down
How
everything
could you do this? Like, no
that
way.
you're looking at. So, I mean, it's better to just every 12 people pay attention, and between the 12 of them, they're going to remember. They're going to catch everything that's
Right.
important. We have
The
to
big things, absolutely. I
believe.
mean, what would you be writing down? 5'2", killer was 5'2" today, and then the killer is really tall. Entrance. I mean, it's
Right.
you don't even know what you're writing down at that point. What is the importance of this? This could mean nothing, or it could mean everything, and you really
Right.
have no
Because if I
concept
was
of
writing
that
down
when you're trying to
which
take
you
notes.
would be, I'd be really mad by now
I'd
because
be
it's
like,
like my time to
my
write that
notes
down.
tell me they're supposed to tell me this,
Nothing.
and
So
it's not. It's like,
far,
nope. Oh my gosh.
nothing. So why
Um,
do we think that the defense hasn't pushed back more against the timeline? Wouldn't and
I think
somebody,
they're kind of stuck a
yeah,
little bit, especially after Alec's testimony.
they're like, don't look at that. Don't look at the timeline.
There's no timeline.
And Sarah, I wanted Alec to testify so much, mainly because I wanted it to entertain me. I wanted to hear what he had to say. But if you're going to testify, if you're Alec Murdaugh and you've seen that timeline and you're going to testify, you've got to come in with a big news story. And it's got to be really big. It's got to be surprising. It's got to be worthy of why you lied about the kennels. And I mean, it's just what he came in with was like, I've noticed a few things here where I was caught in a lie. I'd like to adjust this dial and
Ever so slightly.
adjust this one a good bit, move these others a little. It was, to me, not it. What he did by getting out there was he closed the door on so many alternative, potential alternative narratives that his defense could have used, and now they can't use them. And I think I've said this before. I am so like in awe of Jim Griffin, because he didn't just get up and walk out the back door when it came to be his turn again, because
Like,
that would be the
I'm
first
tired. I don't want to do this anymore.
Can I have a timeout? I'm like,
I need a nap. I mean, especially after listening to that, like,
it was
I mean,
painful.
just stop. Just stop.
Yeah. Stop trying to help yourself, Alec. You're not helping.
Stop, because you're helping yourself in the hole, not out of the hole. Oh my gosh. Um, so do we think that Rebuttal will deal with Alec Murdaugh's testimony himself?
What did he do to help himself that they need to rebut from? I'm trying to. He gave them more things to think about in terms of motive. He's like, I was paranoid. I was on a lot of pills. I was had a pocket full of illegal opioids when they came out to the property. I was freaking out. I mean, it's like everything that he said. I didn't even believe he had an addiction until he testified, because I'd never seen evidence of it in dealing with him. So he did not help himself a bit. So I don't know what there is to. I'd like to put him on the stand again and rebuttal and say, let's keep on talking.
Anything else you want to say? Tell us more. Yeah. Tell us all the things. Vanessa, the priestess of petty, y'all weren't buying the paranoid defense. Never mind. We say it every time. Love your name.
The paranoid defense.
The paranoid defense.
I think it's motive. It's more evidence of motive. I think that he's just to say that, oh, I lied because I'm paranoid, and paranoia is such a big thing. It wouldn't cause me to kill anybody.
So there are limits to my paranoia, and I'm also going to know
Trauma.
when I'm in this paranoid state induced by my 20-year opioid addiction. I'm going to know what to lie about when I had nothing to do with any. But of course,
before I even knew what time they died, my paranoid state told me what time I needed to lie about. It's just that.
It's a magical paranoid state.
And one thing that really, like, I thought was so crazy was once they got the OnStar data, and he was like, oh, you stopped in Alameda for a whole minute before you started driving again. What were you doing? Were you discussing your bloody clothes? Were you getting rid of guns? And he says, no, my phone dropped between the console and the seat, and I had to fish it out. And I'm thinking, can you remember what you were doing? A mundane task that took 1 minute as to why you stopped in your mama's driveway 19 months ago when you didn't even know it was important until last week? And then you're going to explain to me how you.
No, I am not buying that. They can try to sell it. I'm not buying. They can give it away for free. Don't want it. I don't believe any of that. And the key for me is that there are some things that Alec testified to that he knew so clearly with so much detail.
Like that.
Like, okay. But then these sweeping generalities of other things that were critically important.
What we talked about when
I don't remember if I said goodbye to my family the last time I saw them.
Yeah.
Sir? What? Oh my gosh. It it doesn't make sense to me knowing, we've seen a lot of defendants, we've tried a lot of cases, you know, this is what we do. But let me tell you, that does not track with pretty much any experience I've ever had with a defendant in a courtroom, whether they're testifying or whatever, that notion that let me fill in all of the details, let me give you way more information about things that absolutely don't matter
Right.
and no details on the things that absolutely do.
Barrett Bowler was a shrimper. He could shrimp the
Let
waters.
me tell you about him.
Property. And it's just on and on. And Creighton was finally like, I don't need to know
I
the
don't
life
need to hear all
story
this.
of
But
this
you
man.
do. But you do, Mandy. But you do. He wanted to tell that story. He didn't want to tell, any of the details of, being down there at the kennels or anything, but he had a lot to say about Mr. Boulware.
And I was very bothered by the way he characterized Maggie in his final um just communications with her, that she wanted him to go to the kennels and he didn't, and then he was like, and I went because she just always gets what she wants, and then I went down there and to do exactly what I didn't want to do.
Didn't want to do.
And he said, and then I got down there, it was chaotic, and what happened is what I knew was going to happen. And he was saying, because he was getting sweaty and he didn't want to sweat.
He had just taken a shower and he didn't want to sweat and he didn't want to do work.
I had a client once who her last interaction with her husband before he had a heart attack was he had asked her to make him some orange Kool-Aid, or he'd asked her to make him some Kool-Aid, and she made it and it was blue. And he said, I wanted orange. We have orange. Would you pour it out? And she's like, no, I just made this whole pitcher of Kool-Aid. And you're going to drink this before I pour it out, before I make you orange. And then later that day, he had a heart attack and it tore her up that she hadn't just poured out the Kool-Aid and made him orange. And that, that's the kind of thing, he's still like angry that he went down there and sweated. And that just really, really stuck with me, that that's the opposite of the woman who was beating herself up for not pouring out an entire pitcher and making orange Kool-Aid for her husband before he died, even though she didn't know he was going to die.
It did not track for me with that. And when he said, a couple of folks have talked about the guinea fowl, him saying, where there was nobody out there for them to, have a ruckus over. There was nobody out there for the animals, the dogs to sense. And I thought that,
are like watchdogs. I mean,
right.
Sense
and so thinking about the way that he talks about Maggie, the way that he I felt like, okay, are these like things that he's just slipping out as he's talking because it was the way that he felt?
a little messy, but I don't know. It felt weird.
It was definitely odd for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we've got more questions. We've got a lot more questions. Are we ever gonna get through? Okay, we're gonna try, y'all. We're gonna keep pushing here. All right, so please make sure that y'all are adding questions. Make sure you subscribe and like, because Zeke would be very mad if we didn't say that.
We forgot to say that last time. What impact did the expert's testimony today have on the state's case? I thought that the main expert, the main point that they achieved was this notion that it had to be two shooters. I'm not sure how much weight that carries, but it's always been a very tight timeline for one shooter to do all of that with two guns and clean up. And so that's I think it's tight. And when you have someone who says it can't be done unless it's two shooters, then I think that there is going to be some reception to that theory. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think as the expert was testifying about how the shooter, with the two shooter theory, that the person who shot Paul would have been so stunned by the biological matter that came back.
That Connecticut man didn't know South Carolina hunters, but yeah.
I was like, but he was saying that like this person would be so stunned by the impact of that on, it would almost be like the shooter was injured him
Right.
or herself, and that person would be so stunned that they would not be able to go in a
Mhm.
quick amount of time, get another gun, shoot Maggie, and do all of that. Um,
I
I,
don't know. I've never shot a shotgun, but I feel like I'm one of the only people in
it's
South
like
Carolina who hasn't.
I'm like I'll go out every now and again, but I'm like that hurts. I don't want that.
Right,
I don't want to do that. Um, but I really was not super impressed with that piece of it. I thought that overall today did a good job. I mean, this is what they're being paid for their testimony, but this is the defense's case. They should be
right.
racking up some points here.
I was a little
Um,
surprised when Dick said we rest, the defense rests, because I thought they're
you
going
want
to.
more of a story. You want more of the story. Yeah.
I expected them to have someone get up and say these times on this timeline are not accurate because reception is bad or whatever. Like I don't believe that to be true, but they could have maybe found somebody to say it, and I expected that maybe that they would. I guess I'm glad that they didn't, because I don't think that's the case. But I would think that they could find somebody to say the time is completely wrong, and not just the time of death, because I think time of death is established by technology evidence, and you don't need the armpit coroner to establish time of death.
And we said this multiple times on Twitter, but in South Carolina, a coroner is not a medical examiner, is not a pathologist. That's not what the coroner does. The coroner is an elected official. Now there are some who have those qualifications to also be a medical examiner, but it is not a requirement. So, you know, for many, it's a, I hate to say a general a general estimation, but it really is. So I think that the state was really wise in using the technology to establish that
Yes.
the time of death
Right.
instead of obviously the armpit
Right.
corner. But
Mhm.
you know, um, let's see. Are
Our
you two?
overall assessment of Alec's testimony, what'd you think of it? I think I've said some of it, of what I think.
I think on direct, I think it was stronger. Of course. Um, I think that a lot of what he said, I think he tried to show emotion and tried to appear that he was heartbroken, the mags and the pawpaw and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
um you know I think that overall I think he scored better in my mind than I was expecting him to.
Okay.
um because just being up there for, number one, you're on trial for the double murder of your wife and son.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're up there for hours and hours and hours on end. I thought he held up pretty well, and he did the best he could to really rattle Creighton Waters, and take control of the entire scene. But I
I
also think Creighton did a really good job
Creighton
of
almost
changing things
had
up.
you could see the rage under the surface a few times. And Creighton, I think, got that to boil up and really show a time or two to the jury. And it was not a typical cross that, and a lot of
Yeah,
people criticized Creighton Waters for that. But, I'm sure you're like me, you've had a witness on the other side. They're not going to give you yes and no answers, no matter what you ask. And you can either get upset about it, or you can adapt your
right.
line of questioning to their way of answering. And that's how Alec is. I felt like he was very out of his element on direct, because that was not he was, very hyper aware that he was expected to be emotional. A lot of it felt forced. A lot of it felt just not authentic on direct.
Right.
He could be innocent and still be a little too self-aware and nervous and come across that way on direct. But then when he was on cross, he was like, okay, this is what I do. I spar. I'm in my element. I'm in a courtroom. This courtroom, I
I'm used to this. This is my
like
courtroom.
this. Let's do this. And when Creighton would say, okay, go ahead, talk about what you want to talk about. And then he would kind of lead him into a trap and
Right.
he'd fall in. I thought it was masterful. And these out of South Carolina lawyers who are critiquing him, just I don't think they know what they're talking about, because I mean what Creighton did is he got Alec to close the door on possible alternative suspects
He
and
did.
theories. And so that's what you want, right? I mean, he didn't get him to confess completely, but he got him to go a whole lot farther than he had.
Right. There was nobody else there, and then I
Right.
left, and then it's like what more really could you ask for? I mean, other than, that
The confession.
Perry Mason moment that, is not really gonna
I
happen.
mean, what did they want?
But
Close.
yeah. No- Okay, well, I've got to ask this question because this is pretty hilarious. Tommy Moore, is $15 too much for a beer at a Hootie show? I mean,
I
maybe you
don't
haven't been to
know.
a concert in a while, but it's not.
It's not.
I
I
mean,
don't
that's
drink
pretty decent
beer.
for a beer. I mean, if you're drinking liquor, it is, but the Hootie show, that was, I
I would
know that John
imagine
Marvin,
beer and it's hot. By the time you get to the bottom, it sounds really gross to
that,
me.
well,
But,
that's very true.
but
Um, but I did like that testimony from John Marvin, really trying to, give an outsider's perspective on, Alec and Maggie. Um, they were swaying, they were holding hands at the concert. Trying to humanize their relationship and kind of
Mhm.
um, redirect some of that. But
Yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to, they want there to be like a traditional motive of family marital strife and all this. And I don't think this is that kind of case.
this is
So,
definitely non-traditional in,
right.
in pretty much every sense.
Yeah.
Um, for sure.
Did
Um,
Sled check the sink and shower and drains of the house for blood? No, that would have been a really good idea if they had done that.
and in
That
fact, they didn't even execute the search warrant,
right.
at least initially that night when, everyone was there. They were kind of getting escorted around the house, right? And that was
From room to room.
from room to room. And that was really just a moment where you just want to scratch your head and say, "Oh my
That was
gosh,
very John Benet Ramsey crime scene. Just like, let me take you around. Let me give you a tour of the
nothing
house.
to see here. There's nothing to see
Yeah.
here. There's nothing to see here."
And then law enforcement is very much like deferential to the family.
Right.
That seems to only happen with wealthy, well-connected people for some reason. It's
Well,
just
you know, I even, what John Marvin Murdoch was testifying to today, that, the truck breaks down and he calls the sheriff to come pick him up and take him the rest of the way. It's like,
chief of police.
yeah, the
Yeah,
chief, it's like,
he was
okay,
a friend and
a friend.
coming to the scene too.
Uh,
So why could Alec not say murder or killed? He always said hurt. That's a question that's coming in, and so I don't know. I think
I think it's
anybody.
easier for people to rationalize the word hurt rather than kill or murder. So
Yeah.
it's like when you're talking to someone who may be suicidal. One of the
Mm,
questions that you are to ask is not, do you have plans to hurt yourself, but you use the word, do you have a plan to kill yourself? Because
right.
that word is so startling for most people that it's like, what? What?
Right.
So
Right.
the hurt is the soft word, kill, murder, those are the hard words. And so I think, of course, he didn't want to use those because it's, you know, doesn't want to give any credence that he didn't have anything to do with that. He didn't kill or murder. Um, so that's kind of the way that I think about that.
Yeah, yeah. And And two, I think it's just he's softening everything. When people come to get their wills done at my office, because I run a small town law office and we do like a little bit of everything, but we don't do criminal defense. And people will come to get their wills done, and they won't say, when I die, I want X to have my stuff. They'll say, if something should ever happen to me. And I'm
Honey,
like,
it's gonna happen to all of us,
you
though.
mean die? You mean you're like when
We're
you
all
die?
gonna go. We're all gonna
If
go.
something should happen. So I mean, people just they soften everything around death. So I don't know what to read into that.
Um, yeah, I think that's just the natural. Um, just you want to just be a little bit soothing and ease into things.
Do you think it would be good strategy, Sarah, for them to bring in a doctor to testify that that amount of opioids is just not compatible with the level of functioning that he did? Because I have a strong opinion about that. That question has come in, and I've heard a lot of people who kind of don't think the way I do on this.
I don't know that that's necessary. I don't know, I think it's almost giving credence to what Alec is saying and giving him a leg up and saying, what you were testifying to, we're so worried about it that we're going to bring somebody in here and say the exact opposite of that.
That's
Um,
that's an
so
interesting.
that's kind of what I think about that. I think, there are some people who, have been and said, well, my, best friend's uncle's grandfather used to do 65, 30 milligram pills every day, and he worked every day of his life, never had a health problem. And
Maybe.
I just have a very hard time believing that.
I think he would have liver failure. I didn't even
There'd be
believe
a lot of stuff
me.
there. So
When he first claimed that he had an opioid addiction. I was like, I have known this guy since 2008. He does not take opioids. Now I think I was wrong. I think they probably did affect him differently than
but 60,
no.
70 pills a day?
No. But if you get somebody on the stand to testify that he's lying about that, there's no way he was consuming all the pills he bought, then the next step is, well, he was
Dun, dun,
selling them.
dun.
Then, well, if he was selling them, he was dealing with drug dealers, drug lords, people who don't think anything about killing your family. Well, it's the third party. It's not him. I don't think it's that sends like a chain reaction of conclusions that I don't think the state wants to kick off. They don't
No.
want to light that fuse. I don't think they bring in anybody. The jury they've got enough people on the jury affected by opioids.
They
In
might
some
have an uncle's brother that,
they're gonna
or
they're gonna
everyone's
have
like,
an
this
opinion
is
about it. And I
hitting the
don't think
BS meter.
anything to do with his guilt. It only serves to make it look like somebody else might have done it.
True.
So I don't
Very
think that
true.
would be smart for the state. Now, I see a question that I'm going to address because I do know the answer to this, and I can't talk about it any further than just saying no. But the question is, will Lindsay Edwards testify in rebuttal? Lindsay Edwards is the woman who was trafficked to Alec many years ago. She gave an interview on Fitz News, and I am her attorney. So I can say no, she is not involved in this trial. She won't be testifying on rebuttal. And I'm going to shut that down.
And there we go. There you have it right here. Let's see. GM evidence showed that Alex Murdaugh's car, and sorry, y'all, I don't have my glasses, so I'm like straining here. Showed Alex Murdaugh's car was not turned off when he returned home from his mom's. It stayed running until he went to the kennel. Why is no one talking about that? Well, you're talking about that, and we're talking about that.
For now, we're talking about
We're
it. I
talking
think
about
that's
it.
very interesting, and I do think that looks like it is accurate information, because there is nothing in that OnStar data that shows that it was ever turned off when he went into the house. That shows that he did not intend to be going into the house with Maggie and Paul being in the house. that he already knew he was going to get back in his car and drive again. So unless there is something inaccurate that this person
But
is
this
not
is satellite. This is not like,
right.
this is, yeah, I mean, this is not traditional, like,
Yeah.
cell phone service, broadband, any of that. I mean, this is satellite, which is pretty darn accurate, is my understanding of
And
that.
bring that out in his closing. And so that's yeah, I think that that's something that I hope that he does. He's got so much, but that I think is an important checkbox.
I think so too. I think so too. Um, and I want to just point this out too, that a lot of the things that I keep seeing y'all ask questions on here, which fantastic, and also things that we keep seeing on Twitter, just because the prosecution is not making a bigger deal out of a lot of these things does not mean it's not registering and that they're not going to use it for closing.
Right. They very much can.
Absolutely. So we're going to take just a couple more questions to make sure you get your questions in, because we're going to stay just a couple more minutes and try to answer a couple more of these. Um, let's see. Okay, so we have a question. I don't know if this is someone, let's see. Will Let's look at what happens on the field trip. Will the lawyers address the jury? Is it just a quick visit with no questions or arguments? My understanding is that the judge will go, the attorneys will go, the court reporter will go, the jury will go. There will be security that will go. Um, but that's pretty much it, is my understanding of that.
Let's explore.
Right. And I think there will be some sort of I don't think they're going to just say, okay, we're here on 1,700 acres, go
You're
forth.
right. Here is the area. They may even like rope it off with tape or something.
Right.
And you can walk around, but you can't discuss it with each other. You basically just roam in silence. That's how
Right.
I see it.
Right. That's kind of my understanding. I don't think that there's going to be, the court reporter is going to be there in case there's some sort of interaction that needs, we'll be taking down everything. Um, but I don't anticipate that there will be any sort of, you know, arguments or major things that are going to be happening, with that. So, um, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Thank you, Is it Madeline? Madeline Bullet. Thank you. Please hit the like button for this awesome channel. Let's help it grow. Thank you. We appreciate
So
y'all are so fantastic. Y'all are just like the sweetest folks. We have really enjoyed, this is such a horrible thing for us to be talking about day in and day out, but connecting with so many of y'all and trying to answer questions and give perspective and hearing from y'all and us gaining perspective on, how people who are not attorneys may be looking at this. It's so helpful for us, and we've really enjoyed that, and that's why we've said, hey, all right,
can I
come
ask you
have a
something? I
conversation.
just saw this and somebody says, is it true that the jury does not know that Alec Murdaugh is in custody? I haven't even thought about that, but
Interesting question.
they're not being told that, but I would think that they would know, but
I think they would kind of know by default. Traditionally, a defendant, when they are at trial, at least they're not going to be in cuffs unless they are considered like a flight risk, or a danger in the courtroom. Of course, when Alec comes into court, he's initially cuffed, and then he's his handcuffs are taken off. But I don't know how they're thinking about that. A lot of the people when they first got on the jury, or when they were being qualified, rather, a lot of people knew about the case. I mean, that's pretty much impossible in a small community, but how much they knew about it, is different. So,
right. Some said that they didn't have a clue, which was very surprising.
very true. Very true. Um, let's see. And yes, a lot of people were talking about, um, Alex did refer to being in custody as well, when he was
That's right. He
testifying.
said we don't have newspapers in
We don't
jail.
have newspapers in jail.
That's right. He said that.
Exactly. So I think
Exactly.
they would know, but
I had
Yeah.
forgotten about that. Yeah. If they didn't
Um,
know, they got surprised when he
they
said
got right. They're like, "What? He's not living at home. We're not going to his house on Thursday." Um, so maybe a good place for us to wrap up for tonight is, what do you expect for closing arguments? Do you think this is going to be something that's going to take hours, days? Are we going to go through the weekend? What do you think? Because I've seen all of those things happen
I
before.
don't know if we go through the weekend. We might. So tomorrow's Tuesday. Um, you've got field trip and up to 5 more witnesses. Maybe. I'm surprised we're getting to closing as soon as we are. I think Creighton is going to have visual aids. I think he's going to have charts and graphs and pyrotechnics, whatever. He's going to have a laser
All
show.
of the things that the national media has given him hell for over the past
Right.
6 weeks, he's gonna be like, "I'm gonna show you, duh."
Exactly.
We'll have
Exactly.
we'll
Well, they're
have
just
it
they're
all.
just being wrong. But I think he will have a lot to present because it is a very complicated case. Dick offered to limit to 2 hours.
The 2 hours, right?
Agree, and of course he didn't. And I think that was a very, bold kind of move to say, hey, let's do this,
Let's
knowing
do
that you're
this.
going to get
It's just, let's
shot
make it
down.
easier on everybody else. Let's
Right.
just go ahead and get to it in 2 hours. Like,
That's why I wish I was more like him. Like I would never have the guts to do that. It'd be like, oh, let me ask you to
let
please.
me say, I don't want to hear any more from you. I'm going to put out this arbitrary number that I think we shouldn't go over,
You
and
need
going
to
to make
limit
you look
your
like a jerk for denying what I'm throwing out
speech.
there. When the burden of proof is not on me, I mean, my job is to poke holes in this and say this is reasonable doubt, this is reasonable doubt. The
I
state
want
has
you to
all
limit
of
your
this to do.
speaking.
It's like,
I expect you
you
to do
got to
that
say,
as a
I mean,
courtesy. That would
it's
just, I wish I
it's
had the guts to like propose things like that and act like I thought that they were reasonable. I really do like admire whatever that moxie is in him, that I wish I had 2 drops of it,
two
because
drops,
I
two
just
drops.
couldn't do it. I could not do it. But he did it and he got shot down and he was cool with it too. He didn't, he didn't,
Right?
I bet he didn't think about it. He didn't go home and stress over it and think, I shouldn't have asked that.
I should feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Well, y'all, we have enjoyed chatting with y'all as always in our new revamped Palmetto Primetime. We are very excited to let y'all know that our podcast, our first episode, which surprise, surprise, is a deeper look into the Murdaugh trial, will debut on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock in prime time.
Okay.
So we hope that y'all will take a listen to that, and it will be available not only here on our YouTube channel, but on every platform that you get your favorite podcasts. So please make sure that you subscribe and that you like, and that you share if you're getting any value about the things that we're talking about. And we hope that you are. We hope that you will share what we're doing, what we're talking about, and that you will talk to us. Let us know the things that you want us to talk about, because we want to make this a great transition as we move out of the Murdaugh trial. There are so many other trials that need attention. There's so many other issues that need attention, and we want to chat those with you. So, Mandy,
Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been just the probably the best thing that has come out of this time of trial watching for me, is making these connections with awesome people who share the interest and just really want to understand what's going on. So thank you. And thank you,
thanks.
Sarah, for reaching out to me that day and saying, hey, you want to do a Twitter talk? That was really awesome.
Maybe we'll have a couple people, and y'all are we're I think someone just said they were almost at 500 subscribers, which is
Oh,
completely like, oh my gosh. So hopefully we'll get there soon. We appreciate it. Um, so y'all make sure you tune in as our first podcast episode debuts on Wednesday at 8 o'clock. And of course, you can catch us on Twitter and social media. And we hope that everyone has a really great evening. Keep watching, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank you. Bye bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.